prompter here so I can see if we're working now. It has been a rough week in the Caldwell house, starting with that sickness that hit me during the Sunday morning worship service. I'm still looking here to see. There we go, live. So I have no idea what I said last week. I was feeling so bad by the time that I finished up. So we're going to do a little bit of review from last Sunday on this subject. If we can get through this lesson in one time, then we'll begin this evening with what the scriptures teach us about hell, and then finish up the series with where are the dead now that we have been looking at. Paul told us in 1 Corinthians that our hope in Christ goes well beyond this world, and if it doesn't stretch beyond this world, then we are, of most people, just most miserable, because if it dies with us when we die and leave this world, then what hope do we really have? With this series of lessons, we have been looking at the moment that time ends on this earth and what's going to happen. When Jesus returns, this world is going to end, then the judgment, and then we are going to be sentenced to one of two places. The righteous will be ushered into heaven, and those who have not obeyed God and His word will be sentenced to hell. That is our hope that we have, that is laid up for us. The gospel has taught us that those who have lived faithful have this hope. In Colossians chapter 1 and verse 5, because of the hope which is laid up for you in heaven, which you have heard in the word of truth of the gospel. It's in there. It's talked about from the beginning to the end, about this evidence of the hope that we have, and it can be ours, just like it could be theirs, that Paul was telling them about. It should be ours as well. Whatever is happening in this world, the sadness, the turmoil, the social and political upheaval that's going on, all that going on around us, the Christian can still look to that hope of having comfort with that heavenly home. Jesus described it, and should be a great source of comfort for us, in John chapter 14. He was going to prepare us this place. Don't be worried, as he was trying to comfort his disciples. I'm leaving, but here's where I'm going, and here's where you can go too. And we, as Christians, have that hope as well. That's an inheritance. I missed this point last week in my notes. I can't imagine why. But it's our home is our inheritance, our eternal inheritance. In 1 Peter chapter 1 and beginning in verse 3. 1 Peter chapter 1 and beginning in verse 3. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to His abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, and that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. If we have an earthly inheritance of some sort, what is happening to it? Well, it's depreciating in value. It's decaying as it ages, as everything does, including us. We decay as we age. Even if we have something that does appreciate in value, it will not survive past the end of time. When the world ends, that is when it stops. Our heavenly home is an inheritance that's never going to depreciate. It will not fade. It is imperishable. It's going to last forever. And it's safe and secure. Jesus tells us in Matthew 25 and verse 34 that this inheritance has been prepared for us and is being prepared for us and waiting on us. And it's been that way from the foundation of the world. That is when that eternal home began being prepared for us, for all those who have obeyed the gospel. And as we looked at last week, we'll kind of go through these quickly. This heavenly home, it's not yet come. The faithful are looking towards it, like those in Hebrews. Its builder and maker is God. All the construction that we have going on in here, the craftsmanship that we see, compares in no way to what this city will be like, because it is built by God. It is a new heaven and a new earth, because this world, as we know it, is going to be gone. It is going to be obliterated in the last day. Several places we look at, and we're going to look at a few more verses this morning, talking about this new Jerusalem, this heaven coming down out of earth, or out of heaven, coming down. Whenever heaven and hell are referenced, one is upward and one is downward. Heaven is always upward. It is a new heaven and a new earth, again, because the old one has been destroyed. And God is there, dwelling with his people. He who overcomes will be there with him. That's where we got to last week. In Revelation chapter 21 and beginning in verse 3. Revelation chapter 21 and beginning in verse 3. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God, as opposed to those who will be in hell, which we will be looking at, Lord willing, this evening. Those who will be in hell, the vilest, who have ever walked the face of the earth. That's who we will be with eternally. In heaven, we will be with God forever. The scriptures are very clear on the differences between heaven and hell. No pun intended, but it's night and day difference. They're polar opposites. And it begins with the inhabitants of both places. God is in heaven. And wherever God is, that's where everything good is found. Hell was prepared for the devil and his angels to abide in. That's not where we want to be. In heaven, all the things that we are used to on a daily basis on this earth will be gone. No more sorrow, suffering, pain, sadness. In Revelation chapter 21 and in verse 4, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. All those things, if we don't deal with this every day, somebody is. Tears of sorrow or pain, physically or mentally. No crying at all, because those tears have been wiped away by God. All these things that we endure on a daily basis, it is going to be gone. There will be no memory of that. In this life, we must endure pain. Many tears have been shed this past week at our house because we lost our dog Daisy. I'm not even going to be able to talk about her without crying about her, but we suffer loss. That is part of life, that we have to endure those type of things. We feel heartbreak. We experience sadness. What about our physical aches and pains that many have to endure, ailments that we go through? All because that is part of the life that we have to live on this earth. And then we sing a song like we did about heaven. That's the home that we're looking for. That's what we should be looking for. Do we really think this world is our home? Is this the best that we can get? That what we have to endure? Well, as a Christian, it shouldn't be what we're thinking. This is as good as it gets, because we're looking to heaven, where those things will be done away with. All the pain and anguish that we have to experience while on this earth, both physical and emotional suffering that we go through for various reasons, it won't even be a memory in heaven. It will be wiped away. That's where I want to be for an eternity. And this inheritance, unlike the earthly inheritance, if we think about those families that have great wealth, the Caldwell family not being one of them, I offer Stephen his inheritance early, and it's usually pieces of Lent that I find. I say, here, you can have this. He doesn't want it. But the inheritance that are available here on this earth, they're only for a select few. The families are not just going to open up their vast resources and give it away to everybody. It's only for those who are in that family. And some families have great turmoil and strife over fighting over a little bit of money that may be left over when somebody passes away. But the inheritance that can be had in heaven, that's open to all who have overcome. Back in Revelation 21, and we're going to be in Revelation 21 and 22 a lot this morning, but in Revelation chapter 21 and beginning in verse 5, then he who sat on the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." And he said to me, "Write, for these words are true and faithful." And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." And again, look at the list of those in verse 8 who are not going to inherit heaven. Those are going to be the inhabitants of hell, the very opposite of the peace and comfort that is promised in heaven, where there will be none of the suffering that we're used to and have to endure on this earth. The Bible is clear, very clear, about heaven and who will be there. And we should want to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to be one of those people that will have our name written in that book of life. On this earth, how important is that inheritance that I've been talking about? If we have the opportunity to think that we're going to inherit some money, how important is that? Family heirlooms or financial security that can be passed down from generation to generation. I have a friend that she is so wealthy, she does not know what to do with all of her money. She has shoppers from stores in Chicago and New York calling her, "Hey, we've got some outfits. You might want to fly up and check these out." And guess what? For a while, she had a private jet. She did just that. That is corruptible. That wealth, it could go away in the blink of an eye. It probably has. As the stock market fluctuates, it probably fluctuated her out of several $1 million with some of the dips that we've had recently. That means nothing because it's of this world. But those who are looking towards that earthly inheritance, they may not have it yet, but they know it's there. I'm going to have it. I'll have it one day. I'm waiting on this person to pass it down to me or for my trust fund to kick in. But I know it's there, and they have great security in that. Well, we don't have heaven yet. We're looking towards heaven. We know it's there. Can we see it through faith? If we can't, then our faith is not very strong. Why are we even here if we can't see that eternal home in heaven? If I don't believe in heaven or hell, why would I even bother getting up early on a Sunday morning? Why would I bother treating others the way that the Lord has taught us to treat others? I treat them the way that they're treating me if I don't believe in a heaven or a hell. But like those we talked about last week in Hebrews, they were looking towards that home because they knew it was there. Beginning in verse 9 of Revelation, again coming down, that illusion of heaven coming down out of the skies. Beginning in verse 9, then one of the angels who had the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and talked with me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Again, there it's coming down from above. But with hell, we go down into it. Heaven is always referred to as upward, and hell just the opposite. Heaven has the glory of God in it. in verse 11, having the glory of God. Her light was like the most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. As we go through this and read these upcoming verses, we're going to find many precious stones and minerals talked about to describe heaven, to try to convey these indescribable beauties of the spiritual realm to us. We're given a description of the size of the city, and some of this might kind of be a political hot button issue with gates and walls. Not everyone's going to have free access to heaven. Beginning in verse 12, Revelation chapter 21, and in verse 12, also she had a great and high wall with 12 gates and 12 angels at the gates, the names written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. Now the wall of the city had 12 foundations. On them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. If this reading, these 2 verses, 3 verses here, tell us anything, it's that we're not going to get into that city but by some form of hook or crook, as people have said. And we talked about that in the Day of Judgment in that lesson, about sliding in by the skin of our teeth or slipping in through the back door. No, that's not going to happen, because there's walls and there's gates, and they're guarded by the angels that have watch over those gates. There's no one entering into that city uninvited. There's only one way in, and that's through Christ. And from a dimension standpoint, I would say that in reading this, we would all believe that heaven is huge, very large. Beginning in verse 15 of Revelation chapter 21. And he who talked with me had a gold reed to measure the city, its gates and its wall. The city is laid out as a square. Its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. Its length, breadth, and height are equal. Then he measured its wall, 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of an angel. Of course, I don't believe that there's going to be an overcrowding problem in heaven, because Jesus tells us in Matthew that the way to it is long and difficult, and there's going to be few who find it. So we're not going to have to worry about those walls being expanded because of so many people being crammed in there. It's going to have plenty of room. And again, the description of it from Revelation chapter 28, described with many precious gems, some of which I may even pronounce correctly. In Revelation chapter 21, and beginning in verse 18, Revelation 21, and beginning in verse 18, the construction of its wall was of jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardis, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each individual gate was of 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. Some may ask if this is a literal description of heaven. I would have to say honestly, I don't know. Revelation is full of figurative language and imagery. So will heaven really be made of all these precious stones that is being described to us by John here, trying to explain this spiritual realm and the beauties of heaven through inspiration? In putting it in language that us fleshly mortals can understand? Does it matter? Does it really matter one way or the other whether this is a literal description of heaven or whether it's a spiritual, figurative description of it? Whatever it is, it's going to be more beautiful than anything that we can possibly comprehend or understand, literal or figurative. The beauties of heaven will surpass anything that we have ever seen or could compare it to or imagine while we're on this earth. So don't rush up and throw me off saying that I'm saying that that's not a literal description. My point is that what the beauties of heaven are more than what our spiritual or our earthly mind can understand. And the scriptures use what we can understand, which would be the physical things that we can see. We understand the beauties of these precious gems and the rarities of some of these precious gems, the diamonds, the rubies, gemstones, gold. Most people desire to have gold either in jewelry form or maybe some have it, somebody like Tom probably has a safe full of gold bars because of his wealth. And we understand that. That's things that we can put our hands on and our eyes can see. Does it matter to us whether this is a literal description of heaven? Especially when we compare it to the destruction and the sadness that is associated with hell. That we're going to say, well, I don't understand this and it's not literal or whatever people in this world may say about it. Whether it's spiritual or physical, it's going to exceed anything that our earthly minds can comprehend. Either way. And I know that, again, whether physical or spiritual, that's where I want to be. Because God is there. That is where He is at. In verse 22 there, beginning in chapter 21, Revelation chapter 21, beginning in verse 22. But I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. The city had no need of the sun or of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light. Again, when we contrast heaven and hell in our next lesson, in hell there's the description of being in outer darkness, polar opposite of heaven. There's no need for a temple. Why would we need a temple? Because what we are worshiping is right there. Back in the days of the children of Israel, they went to the temple in Jerusalem to worship God. That was where they met Him at. Well, we're in the city with Him. We don't need the temple there to worship Him because we're there with Him. And because of that, there's the light. No need for a sun during the day or even a moon to shine for us at night, because the light, the source of the light, is there. The glory of God will provide all the light that's needed. And there will be no night. And when we think about the night in a figurative sense, think about when we're feeling bad, when things happen to us. How long do those nights seem when we can't have a good night's sleep? When our bodies or our minds are keeping us awake because we're so distraught about something. Or when we can feel bad and it almost feels a little bit better just when the daylight breaks during the day. But boy, when it gets dark, it's bleak, isn't it? It makes us feel hopeless and have more despair. None of this will be in heaven because it will always be light. And we will be there with the saved. Those who are saved will be there with us. In verse 24 beginning, "And the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the kings of the earth bring their glory and honor into it. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day. There will be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it." Again, there will be no nighttime. Juxtapose that to what we read about, and we'll look at this evening about hell. All nighttime. We don't have descriptions of anything but what is enjoyable and happy to us, walking in the light, enjoying the light, being in where it's light. And again, look at the inhabitants there, as opposed to what we looked at in 21 and verse 8 with the inhabitants of hell, the saved, the righteous, the exact opposite of that. And those gates, there's no need for security in heaven because there's no one that's going to be entering it that is going to cause us harm or bring sadness. There's no need to ever close those gates. No one will be coming in there that shouldn't be in there either. And as humans, I think we all like to think of things in degrees. And I just saw a comment on social media last night or today, one about somebody that had been accused of a horrific crime. And there was a comment that was made, there's a special place in hell for that person. No, there's a place in hell, but not a special one. He'll be mixed in right with everybody else. There's not a hotter place for those who we deem as more evil than the other, or a less of a heaven for those who just aren't as good as the rest. It's one or the other. And the only way into heaven is to have our name in that Lamb's book of life. In Revelation chapter 21 and verse 27, but there shall by no means enter it anything that defiles or causes an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Those gates that we read about being open, they're only open to those who are saved. That's why we need to be asking ourselves and examining ourselves, and maybe even asking some difficult and uncomfortable questions of ourselves. Is my name written there? Am I living in a way that if I die and leave this earth, that I will be welcomed in? We can see, every day we see how quickly this life can change. I'll tell you what, Tuesday evening, our life turned upside down. We had a really nice evening. We came home about 10 o'clock, and by 10:30 we were singing a different song because the way that we had things planned out, it didn't work out that way. It was not as we planned the evening to go, or the late night or very early morning on Wednesday. That's because life is uncertain. And it could have been a person. Every day we see about those who have not survived the night. Maybe there were 50-some people over in Macedonia this morning that did not survive the night because they were in, I think it was a fire, in a nightclub. They all died. That's not what they had planned, was it? Well, if we're not prepared, that's why Jesus talks to us in many scriptures and tells us, you must be ready. Be ready. Why? Because the moment that we die, it's too late to make changes. That's why I need to be prepared, because that's where the pure water of life is in heaven. Beginning in chapter 22 and in verse 1. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and the Lamb. And in the middle of its street, and on either side of the river, was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nation. That tree of life was taken out of the Garden of Eden to keep Adam and Eve from eating of it and living forever after they had sinned and fallen from God's grace, after they separated themselves spiritually from Him. But we have a right to that tree, a right. We talk a lot about rights in our country, and I think we get rights and responsibilities, and that we kind of get that mixed up politically sometimes on what truly our rights are and responsibilities. We get all those mixed up. The scriptures tell us, and we're going to look at the verse here in just a minute, that we're going to have a right to that tree of life, to take from it. And we're going to be there with God. And where is that water coming from? That healing water. It's coming from the source, which is God. And we're going to be there to serve and to reign forever. In Revelation chapter 22, beginning in verse 3, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. They shall see his face, and his name shall be on their foreheads. There shall be no night there. They need no lamp nor light of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. If we don't enjoy coming together to worship and serve God on this earth, what in the world makes us think for a minute that we're going to enjoy heaven when that's all it is for an eternity of worshiping and serving and singing praises to God? Well, we're not going to have to worry about it because we won't be there. But why do we profess that? Why do people who have never uttered the Lord's name except to take it in vain, when they die, why does their family automatically have them at the gate of heaven walking in? If we have to be drugged, kicking and screaming to serve the Lord and to worship Him, heaven just might not be the place where we want to be. Because it's going to be one eternal worship service to Him. But when I look at the difference between heaven and hell, I think I'd rather be in heaven. I think I'd much rather have my soul in eternity in heaven than to spend 1 second in the torments of hell. Because as we looked at, those who have obeyed Him have that right to live eternally there. In Revelation chapter 22 and verse 14, blessed are those who do His commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates in the city. Now, a lot of people like the last part of that verse about having the right to the tree of life and entering that city, but they leave off the first part. The only ones who have that right, who can take that claim, are the ones who have obeyed His commandments. Like I said, in our country, we get mixed up on rights and responsibilities and consequences. Oh, we have a right to free speech, don't we? We don't like the consequences that come along with that sometimes, but we have a right to it. Or the responsibility that that right brings to us. Just because I have a right, it may not be the most responsible thing to just say everything that pops into my head. Just because I have a right to the tree of life, I have a responsibility to obey His commandments, to obtain that right. And if I have not done that, what makes me think that when I die and leave this earth, that it's going to be waiting there for me? Those gates won't be open to me. The Scriptures speak of the certainty of this place called heaven. It also speaks to how we obtain that as our inheritance. And if we haven't done those commandments, none of us are going to live perfectly, but if we haven't obeyed the gospel, then what makes us think that the moment that I die and leave this earth, I have done what it would take to have those gates open for me? We want to be living in a way while we're on this earth so that when we die and leave it, we know that heaven will be ours as an eternal home. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, if there's something that we need to do to make corrections in our life, whether primary obedience to the gospel or as a Christian or something that we have done that is in our life that would prevent us from having a right relationship with God, then let's make those changes in our life while we have the opportunity as we stand and sing.